Ford built a sports compact that outsold the Corvette in its class, and then canceled it with only 18 months on the market. There's an internal Ford memo that calls this car a conflict vehicle. The conflict wasn't the buyers. The conflict was a car you've definitely heard of, the Mustang. Ford didn't cancel the Mercury Meteor S-33 because nobody wanted it. They canceled it because too many people might. This is the story of the 1963 Mercury Meteor S-33, a car that for one brief window in automotive history was the closest thing Ford Motor Company had to a modern sports compact. Look at the spec sheet and it reads less like a family sedan and more like a blueprint for the car that would define an entire decade. The S-33 package brought bucket seats, a center console, and an available 4-speed manual transmission, and it did it in 1962, a full 2 years before a single Mustang rolled off a factory floor. Under the hood, buyers could option into Ford's small block V8 power, giving the Meteor genuine performance credibility instead of just the appearance of it. This wasn't a trim package slapped on for a brochure photo. This was Ford quietly building the formula. Sporty styling, driver-focused cockpit, 4-on-the-floor shifting, years before the world would learn that formula's real name. Even the exterior design leaned into the same idea. Cleaner lines than the standard Meteor, a more aggressive stance, and badging that told anyone paying attention this wasn't just another mid-size family car wearing a Mercury crest. Period Mercury dealer brochures pitched the S-33 directly at the same buyer Ford would later chase with Mustang. Young, image-conscious, willing to pay a little extra for a car that looked like it meant something. The base Mercury lineup for 1962 was already a step above the compact Ford Falcon it was loosely related to under the skin, giving Mercury a genuine mid-size platform to work with instead of a shrunken economy car. Layer the S-33 package on top of that foundation, and you got something that felt, from behind the wheel, closer to a genuine driver's car than anything else wearing a Mercury badge at the time. Contemporary reviewers noted the tighter, more direct steering feel compared to the standard Meteor, along with firmer suspension tuning that rewarded a driver who actually wanted to push the car through a corner instead of just cruising to church on Sunday. Here's the part that makes this story sting. The Meteor S-33 wasn't a failure. In its market segment, it held its own. In some comparisons of the era, it actually outsold the Corvette in the sporty compact class it was competing in. That's not a car nobody wanted. That's a car that was working. Mercury dealers were moving them. Motor Trend gave the Meteor lineup respectable coverage in 1962, treating it as a legitimate entry in the growing compact performance conversation happening across Detroit. By every normal measure a product planner uses, units sold, dealer feedback, press reception, the Meteor S-33 had earned the right to a third model year. It never got one. And that's what makes this story different from most forgotten car stories on this channel. Most of the time, the car earned its own cancellation. Bad reliability, a design nobody liked, a price tag that didn't make sense. The Meteor S-33 checked none of those boxes. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do. And in a market as crowded and competitive as the early 1960s American auto industry, with Chevrolet, Plymouth, and half a dozen other divisions all fighting over the exact same young, performance-curious buyer, simply doing what it was designed to do was a genuine accomplishment for Mercury. Mercury didn't have the marketing budget of Chevrolet or the brand cachet of Pontiac. For a Mercury product to hold its own against a car as culturally dominant as the Corvette, even in a narrower comparison, says something about how well executed the S-33 actually was. So why kill a car that was actually selling? The answer sits inside Ford's own internal product planning documents, archived today at the Benson Ford Research Center. Ford's planners were working at the exact same time on a different project, a car with a much bigger budget, a much bigger marketing push, and a much bigger name attached to it, the Mustang. Internal paperwork from this period references the Meteor and the still unreleased Mustang sharing the same lane, the same buyer, the same price point, the same emotional pitch of sporty compact with a bucket seat interior. In Ford's language, this made the Meteor S-33 a conflict vehicle, not because it was a bad car, but because it was doing the Mustang's job a year and a half too early, under the wrong badge, for a fraction of the marketing dollars. A company only launches one halo car at a time. Ford had to choose, and Ford chose Mustang. What's remarkable is how deliberate this looks in hindsight. This wasn't a case of two products accidentally overlapping and the market sorting itself out. This was Ford's own internal planners identifying the overlap on paper, naming it, and making a corporate decision to starve one project so the other could get every dollar, every headline, and every square foot of showroom floor. It's worth sitting with how unusual that is. Most forgotten car stories involve a company reacting to a market that already rejected the product. This is the opposite, a company looking at its own internal roadmap, seeing two projects heading toward the same finish line, and choosing a winner before the public ever got a real vote. The Meteor S-33 wasn't defeated in the marketplace. It was defeated in a conference room. Line up the calendar and the decision makes brutal sense. The Meteor S-33 launched for the 1962 model year. Ford's internal Mustang program, the styling clinics, the market research, and the now famous decision to build a car aimed squarely at young, image-conscious buyers was accelerating through 1962 and early 1963, aimed at a public unveiling at the 1964 World's Fair. That means for a period of roughly a year, Ford had two sporty compact projects moving through the same building at the same time, aimed at the same customer. One of them was already on dealer lots earning modest, steady sales. The other was still a set of clay models and boardroom pitches, but it carried the full weight of Ford's marketing machine, Lee Iacocca's personal championing, and a launch strategy unlike anything the industry had seen. The Meteor S-33 didn't lose because it was worse. It lost because it arrived first, from the wrong division, without the internal political capital to survive contact with a bigger sibling. Mercury, remember, existed as Ford's mid-tier brand, a step above standard Ford models, but a step below Lincoln. It never had the marketing muscle or the corporate priority that Ford's own flagship division commanded, and when a choice had to be made about which project got the resources to survive, a Mercury nameplate was never going to win that fight against Ford's own name. Iacocca's Mustang program had something the Meteor never had, a direct line to the top of the company, a research team studying the exact demographics of the post-war baby boom generation entering car-buying age, and a launch plan built around the maximum press spectacle rather than steady dealer sales. Against that kind of institutional weight, a modestly successful Mercury trim package never stood a chance, no matter how good the engineering underneath it actually was. The result, after just two model years, 1962 and 1963, the Mercury Meteor as a distinct sporty nameplate was discontinued, folded away as Mercury's lineup was restructured. Ford's own corporate annual reports from 1962 through 1964 show the company reshaping its midsize and compact strategy company-wide, right as Mustang development consumed more and more internal focus and budget. The S-33 package, the bucket seats, the console, the 4-speed, simply disappeared from Mercury showrooms. There was no farewell press tour, no final edition fanfare. It just wasn't there for 1964, replaced in the cultural conversation by a car wearing a galloping horse badge instead of Mercury's. Today, a well-kept 1963 Meteor S-33 trades in the range of $8,000 to $18,000, a modest number for a car that was, by design, ahead of its time, and is now remembered by almost nobody outside of dedicated Mercury collectors. Compare that to what an equally well-kept early Mustang commands today, and the gap tells the whole story better than any memo could. One of these cars became a legend, and the other became a footnote, and the only real difference between them was which badge Ford decided to bet on. Walk into most classic car shows today and you'll find rows of early Mustangs, lovingly restored, commanding crowds and conversation. Find a Meteor S-33 in that same parking lot, and you'll likely be looking at the only one there, a car so thoroughly erased from the popular memory of this era that even serious classic car enthusiasts often need the model explained to them. So here's the question worth sitting with. What does the automotive world look like if Ford had kept the Meteor S-33 alive instead of killing it off to clear the runway for Mustang? It's entirely possible. The Mustang as we know it never gets the singular spotlight that made it a cultural phenomenon, because Ford would have been selling two sporty compacts against each other instead of one. It's just as possible Mercury becomes the brand associated with affordable performance instead of Ford, and an entirely different car becomes the one every kid in 1965 wanted parked in the driveway. Or maybe the Meteor gets absorbed. Its best ideas, the console, the bucket seats, the 4-speed, simply get renamed and rebadged, which in a strange way is exactly what happened anyway. The Meteor S-33 wasn't beaten by the market. It was beaten by its own company's decision that only one sports compact could win at a time, and Mercury drew the short straw. It's a pattern that shows up again and again inside big automakers. One division's promising product quietly sacrificed so another division's bigger bet can have a clear runway. And the Meteor S-33 might be the cleanest, earliest example of it in Ford's entire history. You can see faint echoes of this same corporate calculus decades later, whenever an automaker kills a well-liked model right as a flashier replacement is waiting in the wings. The Meteor S-33 just happens to be the case where the paper trail survived, sitting in an archive with Ford's own words describing exactly why a good car had to go. Do you think the Mustang succeeds without the Meteor clearing the way for it? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you want the next forgotten Ford story, hit subscribe, because there are a lot more conflict vehicles buried in that archive. Ford's product planning files from this era are full of them. Projects greenlit, funded, brought to market, and then quietly starved the moment a bigger internal priority needed the same lane. The Meteor S-33 is simply the one where 2 years of history separate the car that got killed from the car that got remembered as one of the most important vehicles Detroit ever built.